What's up, guys? I know most of the time there's a little bit of a goofier video ahead of me doing a review, but this is kind of like a review I'm doing with my friend here, Danny, because we're both huge Star Wars fans. You can tell by the hat, the poster behind me, and Danny's always been like a Star Wars fan. You can see him talking about Star Wars here and there. So, yeah, man, we're just kind of go like this isn't going to be a super long thing here. We realize a lot of people did like Bad Batch reviews and stuff, and a lot of people did it show by show. We didn't really want to do that. We kind of wanted to do an overview, especially with these animated series kind of stuff, because like to me, not every show is like super fire, right? Like you have to go through the progression of the story and everything else. And I think you can talk about it better once you know everything they do and everything they've done with it. So we'll start with like just a overall. I'll let you go first, Danny, like your overall thoughts about the first season of the Bad Batch, because we did get the announcement. There will be season 2 of the Bad Batch. So what do you think, man, about this first season of the Bad Batch?
Look, bro, to start at the beginning, I think from like comparing all the 3 main animation series, like let's forget about the Resistance for a little bit. I loved how this series has opened. Like I think it has the best opening of all the animated series. Because, like, if you think about it, like, the Clone Wars, it was a mild opening. Like, not everybody was very excited at the beginning. And even if you count the movie, like, that was something else. And Rebels, on the other hand, it was a cool opening, but it didn't hook me up right on the beginning. It was the entire first season that hooked me up. And when the Bad Batch started, I loved, like, I think it's one of the best pilots, like one of the best like intros for any Star Wars shows, because not only it reintroduced those characters that we saw in the last season of the Clone Wars, but also right from the beginning, Order 66, you see basically the origin story of Kanan and everything like this. You see their storyline of the chip in the brains of the clones, and it's a very interesting time period, you know. I think of course a lot of stories happens between episode 3 and 4, like the prequels and the original trilogy, but most of them are closer to A New Hope than Revenge of the Sith. So I love the fact that we could basically see what happens right after Revenge of the Sith ends.
Yeah, like, so I kind of agree with that. It was kind of cool seeing something almost like you said, basically, it's not even almost, it's pretty much almost butts up with the Revenge of the Sith and like the aftermath of what's going on, right? Like, because you see the Emperor starting to do his thing, and they're starting to have the change from the clones as the story progresses. So like they're starting to train like just normal people to like join the cause and stuff like that, and like this elite training. Looks like they're actually trying to use, you know, at first, I don't know what happens. Like, I guess we'll probably find out in the second season. But like, the Empire is trying to transition into that, and they've got like the one clone that the chip actually interacts with, which we think. But at the end of the show, we find out like his chip wasn't even there. That was just his own personal decision. To do what he started doing. So like, Crosshair ends up being like this person that, because he's an elite trooper, to start training these people like in his elite skills and stuff like that. So that was interesting to find out. I would like to say that like before this series ever like got started, like on a show that I was doing at the time, like I pointed out 2 things. I wanted to see Cad Bane.
Yes, I remember
and
that.
Cad Bane ends up entering the picture here, which was like really super cool for him to basically do like a cameo part. It wasn't like the huge thing, right? Like he had like 1 or 2 episodes that he was part of. But the other thing was, I had said, now my prediction on this was a little wrong because they didn't go as far as I thought they would, but I did say they would possibly go to Corellia, which is where they actually make a lot of the ships. And my reasoning for it is like, this is right when the Empire starts taking over, so it would make sense to me that they would go into like that area because they're making a lot of the Empire ships. And because of that, I was like, cool, we actually have the Solo story. We know Solo's there, right? Or at least he's been there. Like he kind of grew up there and everything. So I was like, it would be cool to have a cameo by like a animated like Solo for the first time, right? Like maybe helping them out, get into a building because if his dad worked there, it would make sense that he knows a little something that make it help him out a little bit.
Yes.
Like not be a big part of the story or anything, right? Like,
but like what happened to Leia on Rebels, right? Like Leia showed
exactly.
on Rebels.
Right. And like, but we got a pretty good amount of cool stuff with this series, with cameos. We got to see a little bit with Hera as well, like what she was doing during this time period, the very beginnings of her becoming the Hera that we know for Rebels.
Yes.
That stuff's going on. We do realize that like most of the people in this story think all Jedis are dead.
Yes.
And that's getting out there. So that kind of helps bridge the gap, right? There's always been talk about like when the end of the prequel started and the beginning of the original trilogy, there's not a huge amount of time there. How did people forget?
Yeah, it's like 2 decades, basically 19 years, like officially.
So like, it was like, man, we know history from like 19, 20 years ago. Like, why wouldn't people like in the Star Wars universe know about like Jedis and stuff? Well, for one, you have propaganda. There's a propaganda machine now because the Emperor Palpatine has like full control. 2, a lot of people think they're all dead.
And not only that, like, Justin, one of the things that I thought the series actually did very good is that people in the galaxy don't really care that much about the Jedi, it seems. Like, there wasn't like a big discussion. Like, yeah, some people like the Trandoshan that they work for basically throughout the series was like informant to them, but like nobody really says, "Oh my God, I miss the Jedi." Like most of people, like they believe what Palpatine has set up in all the propaganda and stuff.
Right, and this is what I've always said. Like people don't even know our history very well, in not just America, but like as the world, like world history, right? Like a lot of people don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. So there is a decent amount of people that if you go back 50 years, right, they don't know a lot of things about some of the world history. Not a lot of people, like the last World War, World War II, not a lot of people know all the details. Of course, they know little bits and pieces of it, right? Like how devastating it was and stuff like that. But as far as like the facts and knowing a lot of things involved in that, they're not schooled up on that. They don't look up that. And we're talking about one planet here.
Yes.
My whole argument about like how can you explain the fact that people in A New Hope, after all these Jedis were there in the prequels, how did people in A New Hope kind of forget about the Jedi? Well, to me, it was always easily explained. We're just talking about one planet that I just talked about, right? And our history that affects the people in this,
which is a very recent history.
Right, like that's a galaxy. So you could easily see where these people know about maybe their planet's history. But to know other planets' histories, like, and some of these people, like we assume because we see all these people jumping from planet to planet in these stories. Well, these are certain people, like a small percentage, a very small, minute percentage of the people that actually live in the Star Wars world. Most people are just trying to hang out at their home.
Exactly.
Like they probably don't even know like all the different planets and stuff. Now, maybe they know about the bigger ones. Like maybe because of the Republic was so big at one time, a lot of people do know of Coruscant, right? Or something like that. But that doesn't mean that they've been there before and everything else. So they're relying on people's stories. But on top of that, all these other planets like Tatooine, for instance, like if you lived on any of these planets that we visit inside of this show, for instance, like these people may not even know that planet exists.
And not only that, but even episode 1 told that, like, in the perspective of Anakin, regardless if you think that it's a good writing or not, like, for Anakin, like, when he was 9 years old, like, Jedi was a myth already, even though there were Jedi out there, like, because he lived on Tatooine, he was a slave his entire time. He just knew of Jedi because of the legends, of the stories that people says. And one of the things that I love the most about Filoni, because even though, yes, he's not like the director of the stuff, but like he's the supervisor. He's doing basically what George did during the Clone Wars. Now he's doing that in this series. That Dave is extremely talented in telling perspectives of the galaxy. That's one of the things that I love the most, because for me, the best Star Wars materials, canon or legends, are the ones that show you perspectives. Like one of the stuff that makes me and a guy named Kevin Smith like KOTOR is the fact that on the KOTOR series, you actually see that for a lot of people in the galaxy, during the time that the Sith and the Jedi were fighting, they were basically the same. People in the galaxy, like the normal Joe of the galaxy, us of the galaxy, they don't feel the difference what it makes one a Sith and one a Jedi. For them, it's both Jedi. So I love that inside this series we had this kind of cynical, depressive feeling of the galaxy, because even though, yes, the war has over, people are not feeling safe. Not everybody is believing this new system. Like the economy is changing like rapidly.
Yep.
Like people that once saw the clones as their like saviors, now it's basically their oppressors and stuff like that. And I don't know if you even played that like in the beginning, because I think I told you that before. Did you play the original Battlefront 2 from 2005, 2006?
Yes, I did. I didn't go through all the story, but I did play some, yes.
Because for me, one of the best stuff about that game, because it was the first Battlefront who actually had a campaign and story mode. And it was like the 501st story through to the end of the Clone Wars and to the beginning of like during the Galactic Civil War. And for me, the best part of that game, it was between episode 3 and 4 that you see the transition between the clones to the stormtroopers. In the Legend story, the clone to like the Kaminoans, they actually rebelled against the Empire. So I really thought that throughout this years, like the season finale or something like that, would be that rebellion, that we would see like the Empire with stormtroopers against clones and stuff like that, because that was in the game. Like you even played with Boba Fett to invade Kamino for the Empire, but unfortunately, they wanted to get rid of the Kaminoans a little bit more quicker than I thought.
Well, yeah, like I mean, because one of the things like you just kind of hinted at there was like we do know like why there isn't a lot of clone troopers and why they stopped using them, because they basically destroyed the base that was actually making them. And they ended up stealing like the scientists there, which is also another thing that slowly starts piecing together that Emperor Palpatine had plans, right? Like for his devastation, possibly, right? For someone to step up and possibly like either through natural death because he's getting older, or through like someone taking over and like rebelling against them and actually winning. He already started putting plans together. And one of the things, and I get it from the sequel trilogy point of view, right? Like some of that stuff may have been rushed because they were trying to make the movies as fast as possible after they bought the rights. And so I kind of understand, but I do fight back against people that say like Disney as a whole didn't have a plan, like that Lucasfilm and Disney working together didn't have somewhat of a plan. Because if you go back to one of the first like book series that was set up after they bought the stuff and got it, was Aftermath.
It was
Aftermath, was things, which was things that took place like after it was right after A New Hope, not A New Hope,
and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. So like, but one of the things that they start setting up during that piece is like you start learning that the Emperor Palpatine did have like these plans that were set in place in case something were to happen to him. You got a little bit in that game that you're talking about, Battlefront 2 in the story mode, but you also
the new one, you have a little bit.
So like, but in this Aftermath series, it really starts to dive deep. Like he had a hidden basically like base, which was one of the big Star Destroyers or whatever. You had one of those that's in the story about how he had plans to go out and find some of this either new technology or new spots of the galaxy that people haven't explored very well, to try to find even bigger and powerful things, maybe even more powerful weapons and stuff like that. So you get hints of that even in Aftermath, which is like one of the first book series to come out. And I think some of that thing is like people like they forget about that maybe a little bit, because that proved that Palpatine was doing things. And it kind of does explain, right? And it kind of does explain, like, even though I think that movie should have been 2 movies because it was too much to try to explain in a movie. And I get the fans that don't want to have to read the books or look at the comics and stuff to be able to get everything. But like in that Aftermath trilogy, like I was saying, it kind of set up some of this stuff that ends up being them kind of having a plan of what they wanted to do in The Rise of Skywalker. Because with that being said, like, even though it was rushed and not put together and not executed very well, like that explains like Palpatine has had this plan to try to like possibly clone and everything, all these like set up stuff, you know, just in case something went wrong. And it kind of almost explains to you like all these things, like these pieces, like how did we get Snoke, right? Like how did Palpatine become what he is? Like we know now from the very beginning, because this is right after Revenge of the Sith, that like part of his plan was going ahead and getting the doctor or getting the scientist from Kamino to come along and already start working on things. So they've not just been working on things, trying to do what he ended up doing for just like a couple of months or something like that. This proves that they had stuff in the works from the very beginning. So that 19-year gap, for 19 years, this scientist has been working on doing things possibly with cloning that may have something to do with the Force. So now when you look at it, you're like, oh crap, dude, they've been working on this by the time like the Rise of Skywalker for God knows how many years, at least 20 something, maybe even up to 30
50
years.
if you count from Revenge of the Sith until it's 50
so
years,
50,
half a century.
Yeah, so 50 years is a lot of time to dig up some stuff and possibly get something perfected. And the crazy part is I don't think they ever perfected it. They were getting close.
They were getting very close.
They were getting close, but they wasn't even perfecting it at that point. And that was kind of the downfall of the Emperor, is like everything was happening too fast. He needed a little bit more time. He needed Snoke basically to distract a little bit longer, and Snoke couldn't distract Kylo especially for as long as they needed to. So like, yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, is like, it does seem like there was a game plan. That dude wrote that book series, and then everything after that kind of built on this little story about Palpatine having a contingency plan. What do you think?
One of the things that, because I'm a fan for a very long time, even though we never really talk about Star Wars together. Like, I was a big fan of the Legend stuff, like a lot of stuff before the Disney purge or anything like that. But I was very curious to see, because I don't see more like a purge. I see like a recontextualization of some stuff. Like they're bringing back some concepts that were already being worked on Legends before the Disney buyout. And one of the main, because for people who don't know, like during the Legends stuffs, one of the major parts of the Star Wars galaxy, the timeline that people actually criticize a lot, was after Return of Jedi. Like after like the Tron trilogy, then Dark Empire, like after those stories, every single story that came up afterwards, like it wasn't the best for the fans. Like normally Old Republic stuff was like the stuff that people loved the most, or something between the original trilogy, something like that. So I was very curious to see how they would do that story again now on canon. And this whole contingency plan of Palpatine actually makes a lot of sense, because even though Palpatine is the Sith, he follows the rule of two. He's always trying to overcome the rule of two. Palpatine believes that he is the end result of the rule of two. Now he destroyed the Jedi. He conquered the galaxy. The galaxy gave their freedom to the Sith. And he's not going to give up that power. Like Vader was never supposed to take over Palpatine after Obi-Wan basically destroyed his body back at Mustafar. So
Wow.
I love that basically what's happening now. I do agree with you that I do think that the executives, the story groups, the writers, they do have some concept, like broad strokes of what they wanted to tell after Disney bought. I do think that, yes, some like for the films, especially like for the trilogy, yes, you can see that some paths, some errors are taken. Like everything after The Last Jedi, the fandom ain't crazy. We all know that. I am not the biggest fan of Rise of Skywalker. Like for me, it's the worst Star Wars movie.
Right, I agree because there are some things I love about that movie, and things that I like. I'll go back and rewatch it because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But there are scenes in that movie that are like so good that like I'll go back and watch it for those scenes. I don't think, like, I agree with most people. I don't agree, like that movie, The Rise of Skywalker, I haven't really sat down and super thought about it like for a long period of time about where I would rank The Rise of Skywalker. But like gut feeling would be The Rise of Skywalker would be right above Attack of the Clones, which has always been at my bottom.
I would save Attack of the Clone, but that's a discussion for another time. My point is that, and I was talking about with a Brazilian friend about this as well. You're the one that grew up with the original trilogy. You represent a generation of Star Wars fan. I am the one that grew up with the prequels. Literally, I grew up with the prequels. When I was 11 years old, I remember leaving school to watch Revenge of the Sith on premiere day. And for me, here's how it's happening, because that happened before. A lot of people of your generation of Star Wars fan hated the prequels when they came out. Mine didn't. Like, we are aware that the prequels have flaws, but like there was a narrative, like people against George Lucas, stuff like that, and it took a little time for people to accept the prequels back. And one of the reasons why people started accepting the prequels was because of Clone Wars. Clone Wars facilitated and show off some concepts that were already there on the prequels, but you have more time and more stories to tell, so you could like solidify those concepts. Like if you see Anakin's storyline from episode 1, episode 2, the entire Clone Wars series, and then episode 3, you understand why he becomes Darth Vader. If you just watch the movies, sometimes I can understand why some people think that he just falls out of nowhere. I think what Dave Filoni is, because Dave is one of the biggest George Lucas fan, he's doing the same thing with the Bad Batch, with the Mandalorian, and with all these new series to the sequel trilogies. So all those concepts, Force Diet, Sith Inferno, Palpatine and contingency plan, all those concepts, they are going to show off way more. They are going to recontextualize it again with those series, so people can rewatch the sequel trilogy and have a new perspective, the same way that the Clone Wars did a new perspective at the prequels.
Right. And like, there's a couple of things I want to hit on that you brought up. For one, I think a lot of things that happen, right? Like, because you're right. A lot of people, I like this prequel trilogy, even though I was older, like you are right now. I'm not old enough to be, I wasn't old enough to see the original trilogy in the theaters. But when I was growing up as a kid, I was able to watch those movies, right? And then we heard about the prequels coming out and got excited about it and everything else. Well, one of the things is like, I think a couple of things happened. The younger crowd that watched the prequels as younger age grew up loving them, and they still love them till this day, just like we love the original trilogy and we loved it to this day.
Exactly.
Another thing is people my age, especially, that sort of was like, well, we like it. There's some bad things that we don't like whatever. But overall, we've had fun with the series, right? Overall, we had fun with the prequels, but and everything else. Well, we have kids now. Most of us have kids. Like, so now when we watch the prequels, we see the prequels with kids' eyes, because like our kids are watching it and they love it, and we understand what's up, right? We understand that, you know what, these probably wasn't particularly made for us. I look at the Skywalker trilogy now, especially after the sequel trilogy, as a thing to where each trilogy that happened in different time periods for different generations.
Yes.
To bring different generations into Star Wars. The new movies that came out, the new trilogies that came out, to me, wasn't about bringing me into Star Wars. I was already there. It's about bringing a new group of kids, right? So like, even though the sequel trilogy has its flaws, there's a lot of kids that watch those movies and love them because that's their Star Wars, right? Just like the prequels were more your Star Wars. The trilogy, the original trilogy, was more my Star Wars. So like, how that happens, I think, is what the natural progression will be. I think the same thing will happen for the sequel trilogy later on down the line after some years have gone by. But like, my thing is, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that's putting together now that's trying to like fill in some of the gaps in these movies. Because one of the biggest things that's happened is, over time, back in the day, TV used to be like the lower grade, right? Like movie stars and stuff like that were way up here. Movies were way up here. Shows are down here. And slowly that's progressed to where now I think in some ways TV has progressed over like the actual like movie space, because like movies are a lot harder to tell grand stories. Movies are a lot harder to have all the plots stick together, because you're having to jump around from here to here to try to explain everything. And sometimes there's just too much stuff to tell a story about. Whereas you have a show, you get to follow along with these people for a lot longer. Like you said, with the Clone Wars and now with the Bad Batch. With the Bad Batch, we're able to follow along the story, and they're able to build these characters up, right? Because I wasn't like this huge fan of the Bad Batch, that new season of Clone Wars that came out. I'm a pretty good fan now after watching this season of the Bad Batch and the characters, because I was able to like go through their stages of development and stuff like that. And it took a pretty good time to be able to do that. So I had fun with it. Now, we've talked pretty good stuff about the Bad Batch so far. I am going to throw out a little bit of a nitpick. The one thing I didn't like about the series, and it's because of the fact that we got Mandalorian first. We got the Mandalorian, and they tag team Mandalorian up with the child. They tagged him up with the Grogu, with Baby Yoda, right? So it was a story about this guy who's a bounty hunter, necessarily not a good guy. Now we find out he has a good heart and all this stuff, and he really cares about things. But like a bounty hunter usually is not good people.
Yes.
Like if you see a bounty hunter on the street, especially in the Star Wars area, like things could be bad, right? Like most of the time they are bad people. They're just out there hired, almost like hired mercenaries. So, and that's a good transition into what I'm about to say. We have this Bad Batch who sort of become like these hired mercenary kind of people because they're one of the few that are free thinkers, even though all the other clones have the chitless happen and they're following the orders. Like, but they throw this little kid with them. Now we really, and it's almost the same thing. Yoda looks like a little kid, but he's actually like pretty old, you know,
Grogu.
compared to us.
Grogu,
yes,
yeah.
but like Grogu is pretty old compared to us humans. Same thing with this Omega, right? Like she's actually older than these people, so that's pretty similar. And you have this group of ragtag dudes that get thrown in with this kid, and like it's almost like the same thing to me.
It's the same trope.
It's a little too similar. Like the Mandalorian, we just got through watching him as he's trying to take care of this little like Grogu, and then we have this other show, the Bad Batch, where it's a team of guys. You know, you can look at them as the A team or whatever. You know, going around, and you don't know how good or like where they're going to fall. You're trying to follow the story. But their main part of the story was keeping Omega safe.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it was too similar to me. I think both of them did a very good job, though, in the execution, which makes me forgive it. But, like, I do not want another show from them to do that same thing where they get a character and throw, like, a kid in there just so, you know, they can do that kind of story. Because, to me, it was kind of too soon to do that type of trope. Almost back to back,
because it is a trope, like, and I even remember that one of the reasons why they kind of rebooted the Obi-Wan series or film, I don't even remember. I think it was film, now it's series, is because that was the same trope they were going to do. They're going to do like Obi-Wan with young Luke, and then they saw that it was too similar, and they thank God they resolved to change it, and now things are going way better, like the rumors appear to say. Yes, I do understand that, and I agree with you. I think it was a little bit too soon to use the same trope. However, Grogu is nice because for us, it's a baby. And of course, you have the cuteness, you have comedic moments. You can do a lot of that character without he basically saying a word. Omega, in the other hand, is more like a Rey type of trope. She's a mystery box. We never heard of Omega before. It was even cool that like she's Omega. There was an Alpha. Alpha is Boba. We never heard that they were capable of creating female clones of Jango. And just like Boba, she has no kind of modification. The only thing that's different is that she's female. Like she's born a girl. But she basically is the same exact genetic code as Boba Fett, which is interesting because now the Mandalorian also recontextualized that Jango is a Mandalorian. Omega, technically speaking, also has Mandalorian blood with her. And what the hell happened to her? So I'm very interesting to see, because at first I thought she already was one of those projects of Palpatine, because the way her hair looks, actually, if you kind of see it, is similar to Palpatine. So I was like, is this like some kind of prototype of Rey or something? But no, she's a Jango Fett clone. But I like the actress, I like the portrayal. I think like it could be so effing cheesy with her, and I think they did a good job. And to be honest with you, like this is something that I think Saul said to us, and I do agree with him, that Filoni has all the series that Filoni touches, including Mandalorian, is the first season is very focused on the main characters, like the progression for you to know them, like the little stories, like episodic. And then the second season, you bring the heavies, you bring the war, you bring the Jedi, you bring like the main characters of the saga. I think that the same is going to happen with the Bad Batch in this next season, or even season 3. I think we're going to see someone like even Tron on there. You're probably going to see Ahsoka. And let's remember, the Bad Batch was an unfinished Clone Wars episode. There was also an unfinished Clone Wars episode where Boba killed Cad Bane. And that moment, Boba Fett became Boba Fett. Because Boba during Clone Wars was like a child. He was like good. He doesn't become like that fearful, like that fierce bounty hunter. I think because we now saw Cad Bane again, I think we are going to see that storyline played in this series. Boba killing Cad Bane.
Yeah, because technically it's kind of like a Clone Wars sequel. Like it's weird to say that because like it's a show, but really this is like a continuation. You obviously can't call it the Clone Wars because you're not during the Clone Wars anymore. So it's like the Bad Batch. You take a new name, you follow like a certain group of people and stuff. So like that part and stuff, I think it's going to be pretty cool. Now, one other nitpick was because, like I said, I overall like this series, like from the beginning to the end. Now, the end to me was a little anticlimactic, right? Like, because I thought hopefully they would show maybe what the Bad Batch, especially if they were planning on a season 2, like what the Bad Batch is going to probably have to face, like give us a little bit of a hint, where they really just did the whole, oh, we captured the Camino cloner, and we're going to have them start on obviously something for Palpatine and stuff like that. Like that's how the Empire gets cloning technology, is because they actually took that guy with them. And I felt that was a little anticlimactic because, like I said, like if you're going to be setting up a season 2, it's like now season 2 could be anything, which is kind of cool in its own right. I think some ways we get spoiled with how people do the normal progression of like a season or something like that, especially if it's going to be more than one. That this is kind of cool that we can like sit here and like talk to forever about what could happen, because literally anything could happen. But I do think it was a little anticlimactic. I was like, oh, cool. Like the Empire got this. They got one of the cloners. That explains what they try to start doing later on during the thing when it gets to the sequel trilogy and stuff like that. But with the biggest thing with me is like, it could have hinted a little bit at like what maybe the big bad's going to be, you know, like for the next season. Like what's going to be, they've already taken care of Omega for a while. What's going to be the thing that like sets them off on their course for season 2? Like I felt like that was lacking a little bit. Like you got anything to expound upon on that?
Yes, because I do agree with you, because even though the storyline was interesting, I like that they didn't like redeem Crosshair or anything. Like it seems that he's going to follow his own path still, like still going to work to end the Empire, or even if he's redeemed, he's going to be redeemed like a little bit afterwards. We don't know. I think I was hoping that now to bring up another classic game, Republic Commando. It was one of the FPS for Star Wars, and actually we saw one of the members of Delta Squad that you play on that game on the episode that we have Greg, the crazy clone, because you see a clone commando with yellow strips, and it's confirmed that it was one of the members of Delta Squad. I thought they were going to bring Delta Squad, because Delta Squad is still canon. They appeared on the Clone Wars like for one episode or something. I thought they were going to bring Delta Squad and make Delta Squad like the villain team, like the Bad Batch against Delta Squad. Unfortunately, that's also a theory proved wrong, but I do feel that this series, to be more interesting next season, needs some kind of villain. The same way that season 2 for Rebels was Vader, and season 3 was Tron for Rebels, and season 4 you also had Tron and a little bit of Palpatine.
So
I think you need that villain that cannot be Vader. Can't be Vader.
No. See, here's where I kind of got to go against you there, because I think the very end of the season would have been really cool if they do exactly what they did. They're taking the Camino scientist and he's walking, and then like maybe one of the doors like in front of where he's like walking to opens up a little earlier than when they reach it, and it's Vader, because he's there obviously. Yes. It's Vader saying, "I'll take you to my master." You know what I'm saying? Something simple. Doesn't have to be.
You can show. You can show Vader, of course, but I don't think you can.
They would have done that, though, I think at the end of this season, that would have been super cool, because like you were talking about with the Delta Squad thing. What if they don't do a Delta Squad thing, but they kind of show the beginnings of the 501st, which was Vader's like basically handpicked, like straight up like stormtroopers, right? and they kind of get into a battle with them and stuff, because Vader may not be himself looking for them since there's only normal troops, but Vader may be sending people out to get them, right? Like to take care of them and take them out. So that's one of the things that could have happened that would have made it super cool to me, because if you are going to play in this space, you can't, to me, I get what you're trying to say, right? There's been a decent amount of stuff with Vader in it already and all this stuff.
No, not that I'm against using Vader. I'm not against using it. Like, Vader is there. Like, he's literally there. You can use him. It's even interesting because it's Vader in the beginning years. Like, he's just got the suit and everything. He's still, like, figuring out who he is. Like, this Anakin's figuring out that he's Vader now. It's almost like a personality shift, even though he's still Anakin. But the thing is, I don't think that they can use Vader as a villain, because, let's face it, if Vader and the Bad Batch are the same scene, the Bad Batch are dead. They cannot win against him.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, is like a little bit with Rebels, right? Where you get these little peaks and valleys, like where he shows up and he's like a major force in like 1 or 2 episodes, and then he's gone again because there's other things more pressing for him to take care of, right? Like, so he could kind of do the same thing here, though. But like I said, if they would have just showed like a glimpse of Vader standing at the door as the Camino and is like walking towards them, and he says maybe just a simple phrase like, "I'll take you to my master now." You know what I'm saying? Like, that would have got you hyped up. It's like, oh,
of course,
there's Vader, right? Like,
but they're going to do that.
Or even if they would have did like more of a Palpatine. But even if they would have did like a Palpatine, the door slides open and Palpatine himself standing there.
I think they're going to do that.
Got you super excited. No. They can't. They can't ignore the fact that they're there. So I do think they're going to be used. I think you're probably even going to start getting more of these Inquisitors involved, like, because they all were named. They all were named with like numbers and stuff, and we don't know how many there technically were. You know, I don't think of anything in canon right now off the top of my head that like put a certain number on them. That's the only ones that are there. So like we've seen certain ones, in whether it be in games, whether it be in Rebels, that got their demise, but then there's got to be others that step up, right? So it's maybe some of these others that like survived all the way up until the Rebels started. This is before that. So even all the ones that have died so far, like in Rebels and whatnot, like even the Grand Inquisitor, like the beginnings of him, he could come back and be involved in this. So like that's pretty cool. I think that could happen. Of course, I think Cad Bane will probably meet his doom, because like you said, the rumors that like there was that show that wasn't completely done where Cad Bane finally meets his end. Filoni will probably finish that in this series. I think that's why he's actually doing more than one series, is because like certain things that he didn't get to tie up like super good, he's able to like finish up with some of the Clone Wars stuff they were planning on doing. I think some of that will get involved. But yeah, like I'm pretty hyped for the second season, because they do have, it's almost limited possibilities.
There's a lot of potential.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why maybe not having Vader or maybe not having Palpatine standing there on the dock whenever they arrive with the scientists makes it even more, it's because it's more mystery, right? It's like, so what are they going to do? If one of them shows up, then you're going to guess that like they're going to be way highly more involved in the second season. I think they're going to be more involved anyway, but we won't know. I mean, because to be real, they could go hide out, right? Because technically they don't have like a true mission. They could go hide out somewhere, and then something happens that makes them come out of hiding to do something, you know, kind of randomly. They could be in a different part of space to where this big, huge like war machine that is getting built right now isn't even involved with, you know? Yeah. So like, yeah, it could be interesting, all the things and ways they can make it and take it. So I'm pretty excited about that. Do you have any like closing things?
I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of potential for the second season, even a little bit more. I don't think, like, I think this show probably is not going to have just 2 seasons, probably like 3 or 4, like Rebels. That's normally the number that Filoni likes to do, like stories like this. Because Clone Wars, yes, it had 7 seasons, even though like the 7 took a little while. But it was more like an anthology. Like there was the arcs and the episodes. It was like a straight story, like Rebels, like Bad Batch. So I do believe that, yes, they need to figure out a villain, bring somebody back to be this force, like that can go to them, or use Vader or Palpatine, or because they use Tarkin, but Tarkin's not like that big of a presence. It's more like the guy that commands people. And unless Filoni wants to be like really depressing, that he can be sometimes, when Filoni wants to make you depressed, he can do it. the ending of this series can be like Vader just killing every single one of them, just like on Rogue One. That would be very surprising. I was like, damn, these are
yeah,
good,
it'd be a big
man.
step, especially for animated, right? Like, because I kind of get it. I get why they have to throw like the younger kid in there, because you have kids watching. Kids like to watch like the younger characters and stuff. They don't want to see like an adult story, you know, about just these adult characters and everything else. So I get what they did with Omega and stuff, which is cool and it's fine. But yeah, like I said, I'm kind of excited about what's to come, because they can do a lot of things. It's still, even though it is trapped inside of a box because it is in the certain time period, there are a lot of things though they could do inside that box. Like,
They can do a little bit of fast forward between the seasons. Like, it doesn't need to be, because I think we were still in the same year as episode 3. Like, so, like, and it's interesting because there is this all storylines like that happened to the Kaminoans, it happened to the Geonosians, like the Empire, like decimating and destroying all the players, all the pieces of the Clone Wars. All the major players of the Clone Wars are basically exterminated by the Empire afterwards, so nobody knows like the truth behind Palpatine controlling both sides. So we can even see a little bit more stuff from the separatists that we saw a little bit in this series. Like, what happened to them? Like, most of them are like being killed because they were separatists. So
I do like. We've been going for a lot longer than I thought we would. We actually started talking.
But it's Star Wars, Justin. We love Star Wars,
man. We love it. I kind of want to end and go out. Maybe a little bit of a controversial statement here. Okay. All you people out there that love the EU like it was, that got upset because Disney made it all Legends and not technically canon, remember what they did and chose with Palpatine overall was in that EU. They took this idea from the EU, guys. And if you love the EU and got so upset about it going away, then you, in a certain ways, you should be happy they made some of the decisions that they made, because it actually takes away from the EU and puts it in this story with all the cloning and stuff that happened in the EU books and stuff after the original trilogy was done.
Dark Empire, man, Riley's favorite story.
Yeah.
Palpatine was a clone there.
Love what you love, guys. And until next time.
Peace.